very happy time. I'm happy to be back. As I said, it's my hometown.
Yes.
Well, you're a happy girl now.
When you go to London?
Well, Marilyn,
yes, I'm much happier though. I'm very pleased.
Marilyn Monroe's death in 1962 remains one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. Though it was officially ruled a probable suicide caused by a barbiturate overdose, that explanation has never satisfied the public, or many of those who knew her personally. Almost immediately after the announcement of her death, troubling inconsistencies began to surface. Witness testimonies didn't align, timelines shifted, and key details from the scene seemed off. Some people present on the night she died gave conflicting accounts about when and how she was found, and forensic evidence failed to explain how such a large dose of drugs was in her system, with no traces found in her stomach. Over time, the gaps in the story gave way to widespread speculation that her death may not have been a simple tragedy, but part of something more sinister. Theories have ranged from accidental overdose to political assassination, especially due to her rumored affairs with both John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. While definitive proof has never emerged to overturn the official ruling, the persistent questions and secrecy surrounding her final hours suggest that the truth about what really happened to Marilyn Monroe may have been deliberately obscured to protect powerful interests. Understanding Marilyn's death also requires understanding her life, especially her early years, which were filled with instability, abandonment, and trauma. Born Norma Jean Mortensen in 1926, she never knew her father and was raised by a mother who battled severe mental illness. This left Norma Jean with no consistent parental support, and from the age of 9, she was shuffled between foster homes and an orphanage. She experienced emotional and possibly physical abuse in some of these placements, which contributed to lifelong feelings of insecurity, abandonment, and fear of rejection. These childhood experiences left deep emotional scars, making her desperate for stability and affection throughout her adult life. That longing was a major force behind the relationships she later pursued, and the vulnerable persona she projected both publicly and privately. While the world saw a confident, glamorous star, Marilyn herself was often overwhelmed by self-doubt and anxiety. Her early years taught her to adapt, to perform, and to survive by becoming whatever others needed her to be. That same survival mechanism helped her become a star, but also made her deeply susceptible to manipulation and exploitation. Her relationships, especially with powerful men, were often driven by a subconscious attempt to find the protection and emotional safety she never had as a child. Unfortunately, that search often led her into situations that mirrored the instability of her upbringing. Marilyn Monroe's life and death were shaped by trauma. Her fame never erased the pain of her past, it only masked it. And that mask, polished and beautiful as it was, eventually cracked under the weight of her internal struggles. Her story is not just one of a fallen star, but of a wounded soul who was never given the foundation she needed to truly heal. At just 16 years old, Norma Jean made a life-altering decision that would set her on the path to stardom. She got married. Her foster care arrangement was coming to an end, and without a stable home to return to, she faced the very real threat of being sent back to an orphanage. Marriage at the time offered not just legal protection, but also a socially acceptable escape from that fate. So she married James Dougherty, a 21-year-old neighbor. It wasn't a decision driven by romance or passion, but one rooted in survival. She stepped into the role of a wife far before she was emotionally ready, clinging to the idea that stability, something she had never truly known, could be found in domestic life. But as her husband joined the Merchant Marine and shipped off for World War II, Norma Jean found herself alone once again, left to navigate adulthood and independence. In 1944, while working in a munitions factory to support the war effort, fate intervened. A military photographer visited the plant to capture images of women contributing to the war. He noticed something special about Norma Jean, the way she carried herself, the magnetism in her expression, and asked to take her photo. That single moment sparked a chain reaction. The photo led to more modeling opportunities, and before long, she was signed with a modeling agency. She quickly rose to prominence as a pin-up model, gracing the pages of calendars and magazines with her striking beauty and camera presence. But it wasn't just her looks that captivated audiences. It was the intangible charisma, the vulnerability in her eyes, and the way she seemed to radiate both innocence and allure simultaneously. Modeling gave Norma Jean not only visibility and financial independence, but also a sense of purpose and confidence she had never known before. By 1946, her popularity as a model opened the doors to Hollywood. She signed her first contract with 20th Century Fox, a moment that marked the official beginning of her film career. But with that opportunity came a request that would change her identity forever. The studio wanted her to change her name. Norma Jean Mortensen was deemed too plain, too forgettable. They crafted a name that sounded glamorous, mysterious, and marketable: Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn was inspired by Broadway star Marilyn Miller, and Monroe was taken from her mother's maiden name. Though she accepted the name professionally, it deepened the divide between the woman she was and the icon she was becoming. From that point forward, Norma Jean was no longer just a girl searching for stability. She was Marilyn Monroe, a rising star in Hollywood. But behind the perfectly styled hair and dazzling smile, she remained haunted by the same insecurities and emotional wounds she had carried since childhood. Her transformation was as much a mask as it was a reinvention, a glittering new identity built on top of old, unresolved pain. Marilyn Monroe's rise to fame was dazzling, but it came at a steep emotional cost. Her breakthrough roles in the 1950s, films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire, cemented her image as the quintessential dumb blonde, a bubbly, seductive caricature that the studios marketed aggressively. Audiences adored her, and she became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. But the woman behind the image was far more complex. Marilyn was not the ditzy persona she portrayed on screen. In fact, she was an avid reader, a deep thinker, and a woman who longed to be taken seriously as an artist. She studied acting with intensity, even moving to New York to train at the prestigious Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg. Yet despite her dedication, Hollywood rarely gave her the chance to break out of the mold that had made her famous. She was often overlooked for dramatic roles, and her talents were buried beneath layers of studio-imposed glamour. Behind the scenes, Marilyn was in a near-constant battle with anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Her early childhood trauma, abandonment, instability, and emotional neglect left deep emotional scars that never fully healed. These wounds manifested in chronic insomnia, panic attacks, and a growing dependency on prescription medication. She struggled with feelings of worthlessness, even at the height of her success, and often doubted whether anyone truly loved her for who she was, rather than who she appeared to be. The more she was celebrated for her beauty, the more isolated and misunderstood she felt. This emotional turmoil spilled into her personal life, particularly her marriages. Marilyn married 3 times, and each union began with hope and ended in heartbreak. Her first marriage to James Dougherty was one of necessity, not love. But it was her later relationships with baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller that captured the public's attention and revealed the depths of her personal struggles. Her marriage to DiMaggio in 1954 was brief but intense. The relationship was strained by conflicting expectations. Joe wanted a traditional private wife, while Marilyn was a global sex symbol in the prime of her career. His jealousy and controlling nature clashed with her growing independence. The infamous subway grate scene from The 7-Year Itch was a turning point. DiMaggio was reportedly enraged by the attention Marilyn received from male onlookers. Their marriage ended just 9 months after it began, with Marilyn citing mental cruelty. Her third marriage to Arthur Miller offered the hope of a more intellectual, emotionally grounded connection. For a time, it seemed she had found someone who valued her mind as well as her beauty. But even that relationship faltered under the weight of Marilyn's emotional instability and Miller's detachment. As she unraveled emotionally, so did their bond. Each failed marriage left her feeling more alone, more uncertain of her worth, and more desperate for the emotional safety she had been denied since childhood. In love, as in fame, Marilyn Monroe remained a woman in search of something real in a world of illusion. As Marilyn Monroe's career soared, so too did the pressures that came with fame, perfection, and public scrutiny. Behind the shimmering facade of Hollywood's most iconic sex symbol was a woman struggling to keep herself together. The more she was forced to uphold an image that didn't reflect her true self, the more emotionally fragmented she became. One of her primary coping mechanisms was prescription medication. What began as a tool to manage insomnia and anxiety slowly morphed into a dangerous dependency. Sleep eluded her night after night, and the weight of emotional trauma, performance expectations, and internal chaos made every day feel overwhelming. Doctors in the studio system, often more interested in keeping stars functional than healthy, readily prescribed barbiturates to help her sleep and stimulants to help her stay awake. This toxic cycle became Marilyn's norm. As the years went on, she combined these prescriptions with alcohol, not out of recklessness, but desperation. The relief they brought was temporary, and soon the side effects began to show. Her memory faltered, her energy waned, and her ability to stay focused on set declined. Film productions became increasingly difficult. She would show up late or not at all, often requiring numerous takes just to deliver a few lines. Directors grew frustrated, co-stars lost patience, and studios began labeling her as difficult. Yet few understood the full extent of what she was battling behind the scenes. The very industry that had helped elevate her to stardom was now using her struggles against her. Rather than receiving support, Marilyn was often scolded, suspended, or replaced. What the public and press described as diva behavior was, in reality, the manifestation of unaddressed mental illness, substance addiction, and severe emotional exhaustion. She wasn't unreliable because she didn't care. She was drowning in a sea of depression, trauma, and self-doubt, all while trying to maintain the illusion of being Marilyn Monroe. The pressure to maintain this carefully crafted image was relentless. Marilyn wasn't just playing a role on screen. She had to live it off-screen too. Everywhere she went, the world expected her to be radiant, flirtatious, and charming. There was no space for vulnerability, no room to fall apart. This dissonance between her public persona and private despair created an unbearable emotional strain. She learned to perform happiness while quietly unraveling inside. The constant expectation to embody a character she no longer recognized took a toll on her psyche and deepened her dependency on substances as a way to escape. Despite her immense talent and deep desire to be taken seriously as an actress, Marilyn's personal demons began to overshadow her work. Her reputation within the industry suffered, and offers for complex roles became fewer. The more she struggled, the more she was misunderstood. Her downward spiral wasn't the result of ego or carelessness. It was the heartbreaking consequence of years of unhealed trauma, untreated illness, and the crushing weight of being America's most famous illusion. As Marilyn Monroe's life spiraled deeper into emotional chaos, her connections to some of the most powerful men in America elevated her personal struggles into matters of national intrigue. Chief among these were her alleged affairs with President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. While the exact nature of these relationships has never been definitively proven, the persistent rumors, circumstantial evidence, and testimony from people close to her suggest that these connections were more than just gossip. For Monroe, who had long sought love, validation, and protection, these relationships may have offered temporary comfort. But from a political and security standpoint, they were a powder keg. To be romantically linked to not one, but two of the most influential figures in American government during the Cold War, no less, was not just controversial, it was potentially explosive. The idea that Marilyn Monroe posed a risk to powerful interests became a central theme in the conspiracy theories surrounding her death. When she was found dead on August 5, 1962, the official cause was quickly ruled a probable suicide due to a barbiturate overdose. But nearly every aspect of the situation, from the behavior of those present at the scene to the forensic inconsistencies, sparked immediate doubt. Some claimed her diary, said to contain sensitive details about her personal life and high-level conversations, mysteriously disappeared the night of her death. No such diary has ever been recovered, but its rumored existence has fueled decades of speculation that it may have been seized to protect political reputations. Forensic experts later noted that while Monroe had a lethal amount of barbiturates in her system, there were no traces of pills found in her stomach. This raised serious questions about how the drugs were administered, possibly via injection or enema. Yet these possibilities were never formally investigated. Additionally, initial responders at the scene described irregularities that only deepened suspicion. Police officers noted that the house appeared too orderly, that Monroe's housekeeper was allegedly washing bedsheets when they arrived, and that the scene felt staged or overly rehearsed. Compounding these doubts were inconsistencies in the testimonies of those closest to Monroe, including her psychiatrist Dr. Ralph Greenson and housekeeper Eunice Murray. Their timelines shifted over time, and Murray's infamous 1985 interview, in which she cryptically said, "Why at my age do I still have to cover this thing?" only fueled theories of a cover-up. There were also whispers of FBI and CIA involvement, based on declassified documents showing that Monroe had a government file and was being monitored, likely due to her support for civil rights and her close proximity to the Kennedys. Taken together, these factors create a cloud of uncertainty around Marilyn Monroe's final days. Whether her death was a tragic suicide, a politically motivated silencing, or something in between remains unknown. But what is certain is that Monroe's story did not end with her death. Instead, it launched an enduring mystery, one where fame, power, and secrecy collided in ways that continue to captivate the world.